Hello everyone, welcome to the workshop 3 of IDN training for the national camp. Today we are going to discuss about the whip and reply speeches, that is prop reply, prop whip, and op reply, op whip. So the way how we're going to deal in this entire session is going to be first prep time and the strategy of whip speeches. I think there is a common misconception that whips are not supposed to do anything during whip speeches or like during prep time in the first place, which is extremely like a big myth. Secondly, I'm going to tell you the strategy as to how you can make like good arguments, how you can structure and how you can like clear the messy debate that exists. Again, the structure, this part is going to be a little technical and you would probably feel that it's like a calculus and like all of those formulas, but it's actually very simple if you are able to like, if you would like go on with me. Then I'm going to also tell you like as to what exactly is your primary responsibility. So primary responsibility of a whip is responses obviously, and then summary, and then obviously a little bit of rebuilding is like the last thing that a whip has to do, and then clean up of the debate. So you know that like till your speech, I think the judge has already heard 4 more speeches, and therefore your like job in the speech is going to be cleaning up the entire debate and stuff like that. Again, extension and then weighing. I think a lot of these terminologies are very similar as to what we have done in the first 2 workshops. It's just like a little bit different, like little bit different in terms of how you're supposed to apply it in the debate itself. So starting from what exactly you're supposed to do in the prep time as whip speeches, so I'm going to start from whip speech and then reply speech, because essentially why I'm not like dealing with reply speeches specifically is because reply speech is going to be dealt by the first speaker or the second speaker, and therefore reply like in the prep time essentially you're not supposed to like care a lot about like the reply speech, because you're supposed to like focus on your positive and constructive speeches and not necessarily the reply speech. I hope that is clear. Then what exactly are you supposed to do in the prep time? I think I've already told you that like you as a team in the first 10 minutes are supposed to make sure as to what is the burden of sides proposition and what is the burden of side opposition in the first place. So identify the burden of both sides, meaning not just like the burden as to what you're supposed to do in the debate, but also try to understand as to what exactly you're supposed to prove by the end of the debate, meaning what is the end goal of the motion and what does the motion essentially want you to do, in terms of, let's say, argumentation, in terms of proving, and in terms of analysis and stuff like that. Second thing then is supposed to be clash identification. Now, clash identification is specific to reply speeches, as in like analyzing which clash is supposed to be one, like supposed to be like one by one particular team or the other. But then clash identification, what I mean in this particular context, is that understand what is the most important argument in the debate, meaning try to understand as to like which clash has the most value and which disagreement part has the most value and which thing are you supposed to resolve as a whip speaker in the first place. Meaning if you are able to do it in whip speech itself, you're like that's the last time when you can add a little bit new thing in terms of like, let's say, new responses, new examples and stuff like that, because reply speeches cannot do any of it. Then I think there is a very common method of how you can have better whip speeches. So this is something which I also do because I go whip speech, whip speaker almost all the time. So the way how you're supposed to deal with the whip speeches is essentially this: have a piece of paper, and like it should be obviously like A4 size sheet, so that it's like there is much more space. So have that sheet in front of you and fold it into two. And then what you're supposed to do is that you'll have two division of the paper, right? So on the left side, what you're supposed to write is like essentially what your team had as argument. So just like write the headings of the argument that you're running from your side on the left side, and then during the debate, make sure that you're writing every kind of response that is being given as like against the kind of like argument that you have run. So let's say argument one in left side, and then if in case opposition had a response to that argument, just make an arrow and see what like write the heading of the response itself. So when I say heading, that doesn't mean that like just rebut the flag, just rebut statements. What I mean is that at least you would have the nuance of the response that is there, meaning rebut them on the best case, which I'm going to deal with later. So just like the heading and assume that particular thing has been completely analyzed, right? Then you have a proper understanding of this is what has been said by proposition, this is what has been said by opposition, and why then we win the debate. Then you're supposed to make sure and underline the like arguments which you think are probably not analyzed enough or probably not responded enough. Meaning, let's say there are 3 arguments from side proposition and 2 arguments from side opposition. then just make sure as to the kinds of like responses that they are giving you. Let's say they only gave two responses, and the third argument that you provided had no response from side opposition whatsoever. Meaning underline that and make that as an impact in your speech. Say that, look, opposition drop the entire argument three, meaning we should for sure win on argument three, like, and you should for sure vote for us in this particular matter for sure, right? But then what would happen with the other two like arguments, I'm going to tell you later. But then just like have this paper division method so that you have better understanding of what happened in the debate, but also like follow the debate like diligently. Do not just like write or like assume things, and then just don't like write your speech in terms of like continuously writing or typing something. Just like try to understand, adapt, and then like understand what you're supposed to say in the web speech. The fourth thing then, and that's specific to prep time, is brainstorm the responses and counter responses. Meaning, when you try to understand to what is supposed to be proven at the end of the debate, I think you also understand what could be the counter responses or the responses from opponents in the first place. Meaning, if that is the case, so you also can assume as to what you have to say in order to respond to the counter response from the opponents in the first place, right? So you would have a clear understanding. Okay, this is the response. This is what I'm supposed to counter respond to, and that's why like at the end of the day we would be able to prove like a holistic case. And that's what you're supposed to brainstorm in the prep time. Last thing, I mean, there are two more things, but I think in general you're supposed to like make sure. I think web speakers essentially are like it's just that you're not just like debating for yourself, you're also debating for your teammates, right? Understand that do not like always like do not be like self-centric and like think that, oh look, I'm probably going to like save some arguments for myself, and therefore I'm not going to tell the analysis to that particular
I don't have time.
first speaker or the second speaker. What you're supposed to make sure is that all the positive material has been already dealt by the first and second speaker. Meaning, if in the prep time, you know a specific analysis that your first speaker can deal with, tell them that analysis so that that is done with, like done away with in the like upper half of the debate itself. Don't leave it to yourself, because oftentimes and not, judges don't like buy these arguments if it is like too new, if it is like too late in the debate, all of that. So you don't want all of these things to happen like in order to tell you that, look, this is why you lost the debate, right? So make sure that all the positive things or all the like links in terms of like analysis mechanism, all of it has been done by first and second speaker, right? So this is what your job is, like to support your first and second speakers. The reason why I'm saying that you don't like leave this analytical links to yourself is that then you would have a lot of things to deal with, and then you wouldn't be able to like do a proper way up, or let's say you won't be able to do a proper like rebuttal to what has been done, like what has come from your opponents. So this is largely what you're supposed to do in prep time, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, so whenever I do webs, one of the things that I've always got as a feedback in general is that to like also sort of form an extension to what your other two speakers have said, which like I try to do in my rebuttals, but like I'm not able to do it effectively. So like what is like a method that you could use to like structure your speech in such a way and like write it down, because it gets really messy for me, so that it's a very clear, concise speech.
Okay, so I think this by this time you won't be able to have a proper structure in the prep time, that is 1 hour. What you're supposed to do is like during those four speeches, like when people are speaking, you're supposed to continuously like try to write and all of that. I'll tell you how exactly that is done. But I think to answer the first question as to how you have to have a proper extension, I believe the word that you're trying to say is that like trying to have additional analysis to the first two speakers, or are you talking about like the extension in terms of a new argument?
No, in terms of like rebuilding and like.
Yeah. So rebuilding, I'll tell you specifically how it is supposed to be done. That is a different slide. But yeah, so rebuilding is again a different slide, and the second question is also a different slide, which I'll deal later. So these are all like very relevant questions. But other than that, if like specifically with respect to prep time, there is anything, let me know. Otherwise, I'll move to the next slide. Cool. I take that as no. Moving on. All right, so in the prep time, let's try to like understand what you're going to start with and what you're supposed to do as a whip. So if the motion is, this house regrets the rapid development of military technology, what do you think is the burden of proposition? And we can start with Arav. Arav, go on.
I think for the proposition, it's their burden to show how the rapid development of military technology in the past has led to devastating outcomes and how it has possibly led to more conflict and basically disadvantages of rapid military technology development.
All right, moving on. I think we have Vedant. Would you like to tell me the burden of opposition?
Yeah, so I think opposition should prove that this military technology has overall has been beneficial for countries in deterring conflict, and how this rapid development of military technology has both been good for the economy as well as the country.
Okay. Is there anything additional that anyone wants to add on? Or we all agree that these are the burdens from proposition. All right. So I think insofar as like the burden is concerned, I think proposition is clear that you're supposed to regret the idea of rapid development of itself, meaning the retrospective harms of rapid development of military technology, meaning something that's already had like that has already been done. And these harms are so much that like you cannot avoid them until unless you regret the idea of rapid development in the first place. Meaning, how would the world look like had there been no rapid development of military technology, and how would like and then go on and define the counterfactual. So this is the like burden of proposition. And then the opposition's burden then is to prove that look, there are no inherent harms in terms of like the rapid development of military technology, and therefore the status quo in of itself is okay. Or rather the idea that like, you know, even if you would regret the military like rapid development of military technology, the counterfactual is still not going to be as better as like the status quo, and therefore it's problematic. I think oftentimes than not, it just like channelizes to like, you know, why rapid development is good or why rapid development of military technology is bad. But like specificities to like counterfactuals and everything is also important. All right. Let's now identify the clashes of the debate. I hope you remember the clashes are like the disagreement between the proposition and opposition. I'm going to choose people. Okay, Arna Dhingra.
Yeah, so one of the main clashes should be I think one of the main clashes should be whether this would lead to worldwide financial problems or not.
All right.
And ma'am, another one would be whether this is merely for self-defense or whether it would actually cause actual inter-country relationship problems.
That's a really good point.
And I think that should be it.
Okay. Anybody else? Anna Rajput, Nishka, do you want to say something to the clashes of the debate?
I think another clash can be that whether all of these countries that are more technologically advanced in military will be strong arming those that are not.
I think another conflict could be if economical growth trumps the benefits of conflict, trumps the disadvantages of conflict.
Okay, I couldn't follow that. Arif, could you repeat?
Does economical growth trump the disadvantages which are given by conflict? So,
Would you like to add? Yeah.
like if you're willing to make that trade-off of losing economical growth for
Okay, yes, yes.
I think like one of the things is that like which side is able to better deal with conflict resolution in which in terms like which side is able to actually like reduce wars, etc., and which side can lead to overall global integration in terms of economy, and which side can also have a more peaceful trade-off.
All right. So
Actually, my clash was slightly different. It was
Okay.
whether economic development for the nation is more important than peace, like not having conflict.
No, I think the way how it would then work is that, so that's the point, right? So in this debate, what's necessarily going to happen is that people are going to say in the counterfactual proposition, rapid development essentially is the product of like more investment by these nations into the military technology in the first place, meaning the budget that nations have, they're more likely to allocate it towards military as opposed to, let's say, social welfare policies or economic policies for that matter. And therefore, it would then lead to like boil down to the idea of like whether economic policies or whether economic development is more important than military technology in the first place.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then what do you guys think is the most important clash and why that is the case? So, okay, Arna Rajput, you wanted to say something. I want to give you the chance.
I'm not really sure about what is the most important clash. Like there are so many, like I'm not sure.
Okay,
could
I'll
think of
give you a
many.
hint. Try to understand as to which clash do you think is going to have the most impact in the debate, meaning most people are going to be affected by it. Like, you know, there's going to be a change or a delta.
Well, whether this is merely for self-defense or attacking.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yes. Anybody else who feels otherwise? And you can give a reasoning as to like why you think that particular clash is more important than the other. I mean, in one debate, you can have more than one clash, which is extremely important. So,
I think one of the two most important clashes would be firstly about whether like the trade-off between economic development and military development. So like the policies, the government, where the government is more likely to care for its people more than its military, and also secondly whether this actually leads to better conflict resolution between the countries themselves.
Ma'am, I feel that this one is the most important, whether this is merely for self-defense or attacking, because it's basically the backbone of all other points. It comes under financial, under country relations. I feel it's the backbone of most of the points present here.
okay, fair enough. And I think this point that Priyanshi said about which side is being able to have like a better world without like wars and like international relations, better international relations is also a very good clash. So let's just try to understand why we think these clashes are more important. I think if you see the first one, the people who are going to be extremely affected by these individuals are probably like the military individuals, people who die during wars, people in general, the populations of the two nations, because obviously it's not just the people who are dying, like the military, but also like the amount of impact that it has on the nations when like as an outcome of outbreak of war in the first place. So that's why first one is extremely important. Second, about why economic development or the nation is more important is specifically dealing with, you know, the idea of like whether like the population of the nation of itself. So population. And then last one is like an international value, like international community in of itself. So if you see this correctly, there are three important stakeholders that people are able to identify. One is like the victims of war and the victims of like bad protection of a nation. The second is the population of the country. And third, the international community of itself. And that's why you analyze as to which clash is more important, because you prove that there is a delta that we are going to be able to prove, meaning like like most happiness of the most number of people, like utilitarian principle. And that's why it's important. And that's why, so the reason why I like asked you to tell me which are the most important clashes is that it's possible in web speech that you're not able to like analyze all of those, like all of these four, like five arguments that are going to be there. And therefore you would probably have to prioritize these three arguments and then tell why you win that argument. So this is why in the debates, you're supposed to analyze, okay, this is the most important clash, rather than this is the most easiest clash for me to win. And that's why I should probably prioritize that. So have better prioritization in the debate rather than like trying to like just get away with the things that you think are going to be easier for you to prove. All right. Moving on, what should be then your structure in the speech? Starting from the introduction, obviously you're going to have like a larger like understanding of the case, meaning try to like compare the entire world. So more often than not, people start their speech by saying that panel. In the world of proposition, this is what is going to happen. In the world of side proposition, this is what is going to happen, and therefore we should win the debate. So this is like a rhetoric as to like how people essentially try to like boil down their entire case on a larger worldview picture, as opposed to just like simply, okay, this is what is happening in the debate and so on and so forth. So I told you like in WSDC rhetorics and the way how you're supposed how you're able to express your emotions have a lot of value as well. The second thing then you're supposed to do is respond to the immediate speaker before you, meaning deputies, obviously. So respond to the deputy speaker. So if you're government whip, like first respond to deputy leader of opposition, because nobody else has heard it and nobody else would be able to respond to them. Third then is supposed to be the responding the first speaker. So oftentimes not, a lot of times the second speaker, like your deputy, misses out on a couple of points that the first speaker had given from opposition, and then you're supposed to make sure that you're able to respond to that unresponded material that has been left. So respond to the unresponded material from the first speaker as well. Next, you're supposed to counter response with summary. I hope you understand what counter response is, meaning, let's say you had argument one, opposition had response one to the argument one, then to that response, you have to give a counter response to that response. So that's what you're supposed to do. So now if you understand and if you're able to follow this, counter responses cannot be just individually, like it cannot like exist in isolation. So can anyone tell me what is the specific reason why we need to give counter responses?
Mainly because if we make a case and then they dissect it, then we need to rebuild our case by giving like a response to what they have said in rebuttal to that.
Correct. So you're essentially trying to defend your own case, meaning it cannot exist in isolation. That means that you're supposed to not just give counter response, but also supposed to give the summary of your own argument. So reiterate as to what your argument was and why this counter response is extremely important, and then go on to weigh in, like weighing as in like trying to identify what is more important to debate. I'll tell you all of this later. But counter responses are always supposed to like be coupled with the summary that you have, meaning the arguments that have already been presented, your own positive material. But then obviously you're not supposed to like literally go ahead and repeat the same thing that your first and second speaker did. And that's exactly is the point where you can add on the analysis, where you can add on the extra like examples for like in the counter responses. So when you say like panel, our first speaker said this and opposition had this reply, but we tell you this and then go on with your response and then tell you as to like why essentially our argument matters more. And this is where you add on to the analysis and add on like impact that like analysis and output. So this is how you can structure that entire argument properly. Moving on, this is going to be probably looking like going to look very like messy, but like try to follow with me. So example, PM has argument one and argument two, and LO then goes ahead and gives argument one from obviously from opposition, and then gives response one to argument one. I hope this is clear by far. Then DPM goes ahead and extends to the PM speech and gives argument three, meaning totally from proposition, we have three arguments. And because there was one argument from opposition, this person goes ahead and gives rebuttal to that argument one. All right. Now, DLO goes on and gives argument two as an extension from opposition. Then what happens is that because totally there are three arguments, and there has been already one response to argument one, DLO goes ahead and responds to the two arguments that are being given by the entire proposition, meaning argument two and argument three. Then can you see there is CR1, meaning counter response one. Now, because LO had argument one and because DPM responded to that argument, obviously DLO is going to counter respond to the response that is being made by DPM, right? So DLO also gives a counter response one. All right. So then what should be the ideal like government whip structure? Obviously, you'll start with introduction and then go on to according to what I have told you, the argument, the positive material that DLO gave, that is argument 2, because that's something which has freshly been introduced in the debate and nobody has a chance to rebut that. So give a rebuttal to that argument. Okay. Then go on and rebut to give counter responses to the DLO's material. So what you're going to do first is just deal with whatever DLO's material was. So first you'll go on and give a counter rebuttal to the counter rebuttal one, that this argument, right? So first you're going on and giving a counter rebuttal to this particular, because obviously you want to have a better structure. So what I have done here is that I've started with the counter rebuttal one itself, meaning I'm trying to rebut argument R1 from LO, and then I'm also giving the summary of my argument 1, meaning in the summary I'm also going to give new analysis, new examples and stuff like that, and that's where I'm rebuilding as well. Then I'm going on to rebuttal 2 and then giving counter response to that rebuttal 2, and then giving summary of argument 2, and then same. So it'll add on till argument 3. Then I'll give a final way up, and then basically I have given this as an example. So it doesn't have to be in numerical order. It doesn't have to be argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. It has to be based on the prioritization of the most important argument. I think we've already dealt with as to what is the most important argument, but then it's possible that your opponents are so bad that they're trying to make this debate about something which you never expected is going to be, and they're running arguments which are probably not relevant as well. It happens a lot with me, and then I have to mold my arguments in a way to cater to the arguments of opponents, right? So even if you think that the arguments from opposition is absolutely dustbin, don't fall for it, and then go on and also include those things and then tell us to why you still win the debate. So prioritize those arguments as well, because at the end of the day they have emphasized that emphasize their time on those arguments, and then you're supposed to still prove that why you win over those arguments as well. So prioritize those, prioritize what you think in the debate became the most important argument. So if in this slide you think something is messy or something, you want me to go over a particular thing, just let me know. But then I hope it is clear, the structure of web speech. Are there any doubts? Okay, cool. Then let's go. And I think that's where Priyanshi's doubt of how to structure the speech properly comes. I think one more thing that I do in order to structure my web speech properly is that I have specific short notebooks, right? So these small notebooks have the small pieces of sheets. That's where I write each argument. So I would write that on the top, I would write the argument 1 and then keep it aside. And then on the next sheet, I'd write argument 2 so that I have a better structure. So whenever somebody is going to respond to my argument 1, I'll then go on and write that response in the first sheet and then go on to this next sheet, so that it's just more organized in nature. So try to have different sheets, small sheets, and then also have that initial sheet that I told you in the prep time, just so you know that this is what is happening. So there are a lot of sheets involved in web speeches, but then you would be able to understand what works best for you. So if the paper division method works best for you, then go on. But the problem with paper division method could be that there's not a lot of space, and then you have to write a lot of responses. Then if that doesn't work, that just have different small sheets of papers, and then write each argument on these sheets and then go on and rebut those arguments under that, so that you have a better structure. Otherwise, I think the paper division method should work. All right. Then how do you respond in web speeches? Because responses are the most important thing in the web speeches. And specifically, if you have good web speeches, I think the web speakers can literally make the team win. So again, I think responses can be many. Firstly, problem solution mismatch, that the opponents did not even understand what the problem of the debate was. The solution has problems, meaning the solution of itself has problems, meaning the consequences of the solution has problems. The harms are still existing. The benefits are lesser than the harms and stuff like that. Point out the flaws in the mechanism. Point out the flaws in the solution of itself. Point out the flaws in the assertions that they have given. So a couple of ways, right? So oftentimes you can just simply say that, look, that argument in of itself is not analyzed properly, and therefore it shouldn't be considered. But that doesn't mean that if a particular argument is not analyzed properly, you wouldn't deal with that at all, right? Then you're supposed to like charitably respond to that argument and assume that argument was analyzed properly. So two things that you're supposed to do is obviously like give that weighing that look, this particular argument is not analyzed for a judge and therefore they shouldn't buy it in the first place, but go on to rebut to like, let's assume on their best case and then go on and say that look, even if that argument was analyzed properly, this is why we still think that the argument does not make sense in this debate. So point out why that argument is irrelevant, why that argument does not have like exclusive benefits, why that argument is still not going to be able to like, let's say, accrue the benefits to the specific stakeholders that they are trying to say and stuff like that. So you can obviously like tell as to like, even though they have these specific arguments, weigh in as to why your argument in of itself is more important, or why your solution is in of itself better than your opponents in the first place. So understand why, like, so I think the key to response is that you have to understand what the opponents thinks, like your opponents think is the most important argument for the debate. So understand what your opponents think are the key issues of the debate and then rebut them on them. I think you already know how to rebut, like counter analysis, disproving. I think you already know all of that. So then go on and rebut them. So charitably respond, assume that the best case, assume that the likelihood is like likelihood of what your opponents are saying is going to happen, and then disprove it by reasonings. Again, reasonings are extremely important. Cool. Then what you're supposed to do is summary. So remember when I like in this one, when I said counter response are always supposed to be like clubbed with the summary of arguments. So summary is not necessarily like, oh, this is what we told you in brief. It's not that. It's basically clearing up the mess. A lot of times, even if there is argument one, the analysis is in bits and pieces in two speeches. And this shouldn't happen in the first place, because I have already told you how to structure your speech so that like the analysis is there and there are no like links missing in the debate. However, if it does happen, because we know that in the debate there could be several reasons why it could happen. So debates can be messy, meaning the analysis like in bits and pieces in different places. What you're supposed to do is that clear up the mess, meaning clear up the, like, let's say if there is a bookshelf and you think it's not categorized properly, what you're supposed to do as a speaker is supposed to be like categorizing every single thing in a proper way. So categorize, okay, this was the argument, first speaker gave this analysis, second speaker gave this analysis, and I'm going to give this analysis. So categorize it in a way and like then present it in a way which is more strategical to do as a whip speaker, which is going to be more convincing for the judge. So let's say, I think it's always like more convincing to judges to know that there's linear dissection of like reasoning, meaning my first speaker gave you two reasons, first being this, second being this, and I give you these reasons, or your deputy gave you these reasons. So these reasons are what like is going to make the judge feel that, okay, if I don't buy this reason, I for sure buy this reason, and therefore I should vote for proposition. All right. I think then, in summary, structurize that analysis in one place, but also add on, let's say, new example, a little bit of more analysis, so that it looks more convincing. It looks like there are no loopholes in the case in the first place. Then go on and understand that you won't be able to say everything in like 8 minutes. Like, so obviously you have to prioritize. So you obviously won't be able to say that, okay, this is what an analysis was. So understand, like, what do you think? Out of those 5 reasons, the judge is more likely to buy. So tell them that these are the reasons why you should vote for us, and these are the reasons why this argument of itself is a robust argument. Then go on and strategize with your teammates to make sure that the mechanical links have already been made, meaning then you don't have to make the links in your speech during summary. When you're like counter responding, then also presenting summary. So make sure that if you think there is, so as a whip speaker, you are continuously supposed to judge the entire debate, right? So let's say, as a whip speaker, you're not just like judging your opponents like speeches, because you obviously want to point out the flaws and everything, but then you're also supposed to judge your first speaker. The reason why I'm saying this is that obviously second speaker as well, but then first speaker is extremely important. So let's say your first speaker is done, and keep like and understand, okay, by the end of my first speaker, these are the things which are still not true. Tell this to your second speaker and tell them to make sure that like these things are proven by the end of their speech, and then go on and judge the second speaker. Now, if you think now by the end of the 2 speeches, which is the thing that I'm supposed to cover, and which is the thing that I am supposed to make sure are like necessarily proved by the end of my speech. So obviously, you know that these are the things I'm supposed to prioritize. These are the things that I'm going to tell my teams to prioritize and stuff like that. So there's a lot of judging involved in web speeches, and therefore I'm also asking you all to judge with me. So I think then this is how the summary speeches should look like. I think when I say judge your teammates, I think you essentially would know what is the weakness of your teammates. So if you think your second speaker isn't necessarily good in framing, obviously your first speaker is supposed to make sure that the framing is properly good. If you think your second speaker is not good with in terms of like impacts and stuff like that, it shouldn't necessarily be like, it shouldn't be the case of the first place, because second speakers are supposed to give impacts. So just understand. So if you think if your second speaker is not good with impacts, give them the impacts in like prior, so that you don't have to do that in your speech because you only have 8 minutes. So just like try, I think a lot of times web speakers don't get good marks because they don't fulfill what their burden essentially is. Their burden essentially is to give rebuttals. Their burden essentially is to give like counter responses and summary, along with like extension, which is like the least important thing in the debate. But these are the most important things that you're supposed to do as a web speaker, rather than like mechanize your like teammates arguments in the first place. So that's largely it. And I think also the idea that, like, if you think there are some gaps in the impacts, position it well in a way that like the impact is something which the like the judge is able to buy. Then you have weighing. So weighing essentially is what matters in the debate the most. So which actors are the most vulnerable? Like why, like basically when I told you that, okay, why do you think what are the most important clashes? So obviously the whip speakers are not supposed to do the clash to clash analysis, but they're just supposed to do the like argument to argument or responses to responses analysis. But the reason why metrics or like the clashes are important is that it basically tells you the metrics as to why you should win the debate. So provide why as like a proposition or opposition, you win the debate, and provide why your scale and degree of impact is like largely more than your opponent. So you can do stakeholder analysis. So this weighing is like largely like the last 2 minutes or 1 minute of your speech. So basically tell the judge, this is what matters in the debate. These are the most important actors or stakeholders in the debate. These are the ones like, and therefore we should win on these metrics. And that's largely what you're supposed to do in weighing. But there's this motion that I want you all to discuss with. So this house supports the existence of a technology that lets people see the alternative outcomes of major life decisions that they have made. So let's discuss this. Okay. So what do you think is the problem that both sides are going to like trying to solve? So this house supports the existence of technology that lets people see the alternative outcomes of major life decisions that they have made. For example, my major life decision was probably choosing a particular college, meaning if this motion was supposed to be like taken into consideration, I would have this technology and I would be able to see as to like what would be the outcome had I like if I would choose this particular college as opposed to the other. So what do you think could be the problem that people are able to solve? Like what do you think people are trying to solve here?
I think in this debate, we're trying to solve how people can make better life choices.
Galit?
I think we're also trying to solve the problem that, well, some people face guilt after they have made major life decisions, thinking about like what other alternatives they could have had. So if you like give them a picture of what the alternative could be, maybe it'll solve this problem of guilt and anxiety that they have.
Makes sense, yes. Any other things? Do you also think people are essentially indecisive in nature, and therefore if this technology existed, it would probably give them like more reasonings as to why they would decide a particular way or not? Okay, so assuming these are the only three things that we're supposed to solve, does anyone have a solution, and why do you think this particular motion or this technology is going to provide the solution or is not going to provide the solution?
Well, I think that you cannot expect a person to be happy with what they are doing in the future. If they get a chance to see what the decision they have made would have what outcome, the person might not be satisfied with it and will try to do something else that will support it. So I think that this type of technology may not help a person in a like a particular manner.
Okay, because they won't be happy because they already know what would happen in future.
Yeah. So they'll try to do something else, and then they might see the outcome of that, and they'll still not be satisfied. So yeah.
All right. Any other mechanisms from proposition or opposition? Anything which you all want to?
I think what opposition actually could probably say is that, wait, can you scroll up? I just want to refer to the motion once. Yeah, so something that opposition could say is that these alternative outcomes of major life decisions, when they exist, right, when people get the technological access to this, maybe there are a lot. Maybe there are some good sides to this, but at the same time, by weighing, there might be a large extent where people feel guilty because whenever people see an alternative reality, they keep on thinking how that was maybe far better off in a position that they would be in, by seeing the outcome of this, and they would be in more in this inherent guilt than they are when they've already made the life decision and don't really see the outcome.
Okay. So I think self-satisfaction is one thing. Also the ability to not being able to achieve as to what could have been a possibility. Any other thing? I don't know why you all hate proposition in this. I think it's a very good motion for proposition. Vedant, Arav, do you all want to?
I have another point for opposition, actually. I guess
Okay.
another point could be that it shows you many different outcomes of what would happen if you didn't take that life choice, if you took it. So it still wouldn't solve your problem of making better choices.
And if we have to say about proposition, then maybe they can say that if for government side, like if they have a war, they can see the like outcomes that if we do this, then this will happen. If we do that, then that will happen. So they can choose the best option, like for winning a war, for defending country and that stuff. The proposition can say that.
Oh, yes. Yes, Vedant.
Ma'am, I have a point for opposition. I I feel it takes away like individuality. It takes away like the right of people to be taking the decisions that they feel are important for their lives. And it is important to realize that sometimes maybe the thing that makes things the best at first, maybe the worst option in the future. And because of that, it is important. And people have different, like, they have different minds, they have different brain sets. And so with technology, essentially all their individuality, all their creativity goes away. And so you just have monotonous human beings doing what they don't find fun, what they don't actually enjoy. And that is very bad for the world.
I think that's a very good argument. I also think that the ability of the world being unpredictable in of itself is very beautiful, and that's what makes people live in the suspense and want to live in future or want to survive in the first place. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and that's why I am more likely to take the best of today. So yes, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think in terms of the mechanism, that should be the case. But I think what you're supposed to do is why essentially technology in of itself is not going to give you like better decisions as to what the problem that the proposition, like anybody for that matter, is trying to like portray. And then you came up with the idea that look, it's not going to give them better decisions anyways, because like you would still not be able to have the, let's say, I think the way how you can analyze it again is that even though you would be able to see the alternative as to how you can do it, often than not, that alternative in and of itself is not accessible. For example, even if I say that, look, if I had chosen that particular college in the first place, I'm not essentially sure whether or not that college in of itself was accessible to me due to like expenses, due to my own grades, all of that, right? Meaning it still is like a lot of our decisions and the consequences of our decisions are like not just made on like the time when we are making those decisions, but rather as to what we do and what we pursue after making that decision. Meaning, even if I go to a best college in the world, if I stop like being a hardworking person, that still isn't like it. That is again going to like change the reality of what the alternative is going to look like. So all of it is like based on like like your life is not necessarily dependent on the decision, but rather what you do after that decision. So all of that is like philosophy, but I think you did pretty well with respect to mechanism. Let's then move on to the reply switches, the last slide. So reply switches are oftentimes not basically the way how you can sell your case. And that's like the last speech. And I think I think most of the times judges have made up their mind as to who they want to like give the debate to. And that's why I've given the least importance to this like type of speech. Reply speeches essentially you cannot add new arguments, you cannot add new rebuttals. So what you're supposed to do is that basically deal with whatever you have from the first three speeches. So you are basically the sims of the first three speeches, and the speakers. What you're supposed to do is like give a bias adjudication, give a summary and clashes. So this is what the first clash was and why we win this clash. This is what the second clash was and why we win this clash. Give a rhetoric as to like why your case in office and it's more important. Obviously you're not supposed to give a detailed explanation. You're supposed to just give like the overview, bird's eye view as to like why inherently your side won over the other, which means that just convincing the judge as to why you won the debate. Basically, it's more about strategy as to how you present. So, like there are different ways how you can present the same like sets of words, and that's what the reply speaker is supposed to do. But that's pretty much it for today, like the reply speech and the whip speech. But if you guys have any specific questions with respect to whip and reply speeches, go on. But otherwise, that's all. Okay, Vedant, go on.
Ma'am, I forgot to lower my hand, sorry.
Okay, cool. Arna?
Okay, I like the speeches of the other people are like 8 minutes. So the reply speech will be also 8 minutes or something like
No,
that.
it's only for 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Nishka.
Yes. So is the clash analysis and the fact like we need to like portray how exactly we won every single clash something that needs to be promoted more in the reply speech or in the third speaker speech?
So I think I like it. So there's a difference between parliamentary and WSC debates. I think in parliamentary debates, you're supposed to do the clash analysis in whip speeches because there are no reply speeches. But essentially, so the way how I like it is that there's no specific difference between clash and like the counter response and the thing that I told you. But like when you have like these counter responses, you inherently also give the flag as to like why, or like that particular tag as to like, okay, this is the argument and we win the debate, right? So even in the web speech, you're essentially doing the same thing, but more detailed way, and like it's also going to have more responses. But I would say that like, yes, you do have some part of clashes and web speeches as well. But again, I think reply speeches can probably deal with more clashes because you just have to give the headings and tell why you win that clash as opposed to the web speaker. So if you want like just the cleanup as to like, okay, these are the 4 points as to why you win, then reply speech. But if you want to go in the detail as to like, okay, argument 1, response 1, counter response 1, and then the summary, I think then reply. It's just the terminology. I honestly think that it's a terminology in WSTC because essentially you're doing the clash analysis in web speeches as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So that's pretty much it. Tomorrow you have a workshop that is going to be taken by Nitiksha ma'am, and she's going to deal with the philosophy and principles. It's going to be a very interesting class because I made the document already, and that is going to deal with like a couple of things like what are the general principles that you can run in debates. So if you like principles, and you're also going to be able to make your own principles, so that's going to be very fun. So looking forward to see you all tomorrow in the workshop session, and then also looking forward to a good participation in day after tomorrow's assignment. So you have like a good enough time to prepare your first speeches and then send it to me. So that's largely it. Thank you so much for joining. and good luck.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.